So we had been planning to have a little talk here on the show about the possible raise to the minimum wage that could be coming. And what do you know? Breaking news got out in front of us and it suddenly became an even more timely topic. So we are very lucky in a timely fashion to be joined by, once again on the show, by the president of One Fair Wage and the director of the Food Labor Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley, Saru Jayaraman. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. I'm assuming you're pretty busy because
Yes.
Today, the Senate version of a bill to raise the minimum wage to about $15 an hour in the next 4 years or so is going forward. And I'm very interested in your thoughts on this effort, what the battle is going to be like, and the current state of that bill.
I mean, first, I think we have to understand how we got to this point. This didn't just happen because people on Capitol Hill or the president, was feeling altruistic. Workers were organizing all of last year throughout the pandemic. Even during the pandemic, when it was dangerous, tipped workers, restaurant workers, other low-wage workers were out in the streets. They were a big part of the Black Lives Matter protests, but they, even apart from that, held strikes in multiple cities saying we cannot go back to work. We cannot work right now without a full livable minimum wage. We're not able to survive on these wages, nor does it make it worth it for us to go back to work and expose ourselves to the virus on these wages. But B, also, this economy cannot survive without people having the means to consume, to eat, to feed their families, to pay their rent, to pay their bills. I don't know where people think the consumption power that's needed to stimulate this economy from the place it is in now is going to come from if people don't have the means to survive. So that organizing is what led first to Joe Biden putting on his campaign platform a $15 minimum wage with full elimination of the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers, still $2.13 an hour, and full elimination of the sub-minimum wage for workers with disabilities. That then became, he said, a priority for him, but I think it was low-wage workers turning out to vote to get him elected, and then low-wage workers turning out in Georgia, and we mobilized tens of thousands of low-wage workers to mobilize in Georgia to get also to deliver the Senate. And so the only reason this not only has been introduced, but can actually move and pass is because workers made it so. Low-wage workers, people of color, women of color delivered the presidency and delivered the Senate to Democrats, and now Democrats have to deliver for them. They have to deliver a $15 minimum wage with tipped workers included and workers with disabilities included. And so it is extraordinary, it is groundbreaking. We are thrilled and deeply appreciative of the president for really driving this, and especially Senator Bernie Sanders, who's made sure that the $15 bill is part of that overall COVID relief package. But let's make no mistake, this happened not because of the electeds, but because workers had their voices heard.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We can be appreciative of the fact that it's something that apparently might happen.
Right.
But let's also not pretend as if, all the elected Dems have been supportive of this forever. Right. They haven't. They might not be now, actually, but they certainly weren't 4 years ago or 8 years ago or 12 years ago.
They haven't supported for 150 years since emancipation, when tipped workers were Black women who were hired by the restaurant industry and made to work for nothing. The last 150 years, we've seen a $2 increase over 150 years for tipped workers. So the fact that this is included in this bill is a testament to tipped workers, restaurant workers, and other low-wage workers organizing.
And so what do you think about the current state of what's in the bill? The amount that they're set it to, the time it's going to roll over. There's apparently some sort of consideration for raises in the median wage that it'll be tied to. What do you think about what's in there and what's not in there?
That bill is, we've all got to keep emphasizing that bill is the least that Congress can do. It's the minimum we need, not the maximum. It's not a place to start negotiations. It's the end of negotiations. It includes $15 rolled in for non-tipped workers from $7.25 to $15 over 5 years by 24 years, I guess, 2025. And for tipped workers from 2021 to 2026, 5 or 6 years. And so it gets everybody to 15. And then after that, yes, wages continue to go up by what they call average wage growth. So it's not just inflation, it's how much everybody else's wages are going up. That's how much low wage workers' wages should go up as well. That is the least, because let's remember that the minimum wage and especially the tip minimum wage have been stagnated for decades. We all know that if the minimum wage had actually gone up with the cost of living, we'd be way higher, definitely upwards of $18 an hour at this point. And instead, we're stagnated at $7.25, and even more ludicrously at $2.13 for tipped workers. That has been stagnated for tipped workers at 30 years, for 30 years intentionally because of the power of the Restaurant Association. So this is the time to catch up. This is the time to actually push forward and actually get to 15 as quickly as possible because we're so behind.
So a couple of things that you pointed out, you said are the absolute minimum. And not a place to end up, like to start the negotiations from. But unfortunately, it looks like they are gonna start the negotiations from that. So what do you think? Is that an assertion that we have such a strong position that we don't even need to highball them to begin with? Or are you worried that 2025 becomes 2029 and 15 becomes 1325? What do you think about that?
We need to focus on our peers, our Democratic colleagues. I am worried that there are moderate to conservative Democratic senators in particular who would push for a lesser wage, a regionalism, a lesser wage in some parts of the country. And certainly they're gonna face a lot of pressure from the Restaurant Association to actually carve out the tipped workers or have a lesser wage for tipped workers. And we need to collectively let those Democrats know, again, who delivered control of the Senate. It was low wage working women in Georgia. They delivered the Senate. It was their peers in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Arizona. They delivered the Senate. And so the Democrats in the Senate need to deliver for them. Otherwise, they're gonna lose control of the Senate in 2022. So this has got to be a time where they don't parse out pieces, make it less in some parts of the country. I know you know this, I think your audience knows this. This is the most popular issue that exists among both Democratic and Republican voters. Let's look at what happened in Florida. 64% of voters, Republicans, voted to raise the wage to $15 an hour and the tip minimum wage to over $13 an hour. 12 percentage points more than Floridians voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
People overwhelmingly support this, and it's gonna be hard for Republicans to vote no on it and go back to their communities. It's gonna be even harder for moderate Democrats to try to cut it up and go back to their communities and get reelected. So we need the Democrats to deliver. Let this be the minimum. Let there be no negotiations. Follow your leader in President Biden and just go for a full minimum wage as it stands in the bill right now.
Yeah, he campaigned on it. Ossoff, Warnock, both campaigned on it. They were very specific about it. We don't have to have these debates about what was a down payment and what eventually might. No, it was $15 an hour. That's what they actually said.
That's right.
And in terms of the path forward, I've seen some debate about whether, like, depending on how it's scored, they might be able to do it through budget reconciliation. Bernie seems to think that there's a chance that could happen. If they don't, then it could potentially face a filibuster. I mean, what do you think about how much of the Democratic caucus can we, if it ends up needing the 60 votes, can we count on? And are there 10 Republicans, like you talked about them potentially going home in shame to tell their constituents they voted down the minimum wage? I mean, they also stopped the minimum wage from being raised while they were in control of the Senate. So they seem to have been able to process that guilt so far. What do you think about these two different paths?
I think it's easier to message, oh, it didn't come up, so we didn't vote on it, as opposed to it came up and I voted no to raise your wages. I think that's a totally different thing. And so what I think is that there will be a vote that goes to the whole Senate. I think the Republicans will vote no per usual. I think they're gonna have a tough time telling their communities why they did that. And then it will come down to budget reconciliation and 51 Democrats. And that's why I'm saying our focus has to be on Democrats to make sure that they stay unified around this bill as the least that they can do. Look, I want to make sure everybody understands, even among progressives, there's a ton of misinformation that has been spread about the minimum wage and the tip minimum wage. The idea that it kills jobs, that it necessarily, reduces people's hours. The sub-minimum wage, the Restaurant Association has done such an incredible job convincing workers that raising wages would make tips go away. All of it is baloney. The states with the highest wages and that have no sub-minimum wage for tip workers have higher rates of tipping. They have higher job growth. They have higher small business growth. All the corporations are growing faster in California and the states with $15 and a full minimum wage for tipped workers. So it's all misinformation, but it's misinformation that moderate to conservative Democrats might listen to, might roll over. And it's on us to make sure they hear from the people to say, don't you dare carve out anybody out of this bill. Again, in this pandemic, in this depression, this bill is the very least Democrats can deliver to the people who got them into office.
And you've been trying to make sure that they're heard. There's a demonstration going on today, correct?
There was a demonstration today on Capitol Hill. We had restaurant workers in front of the Capitol. We had a huge 24-foot statue of an essential service worker. We'll be back multiple times at the Capitol, but in actions all around the country, going to these senators' offices, letting them know we appreciate what's happened so far, and now we need them to take it across the finish line.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you'll be out there, you and so many others with so much on the line. You'll feel free to come back on the show as we trace the progress of this bill. As someone who has worked in basically every corner of food service over my life, let alone, I mean, there's a lot of people who are non-tipped minimum wage workers, but that's a big portion of it. This is definitely something the country should be focused on. There's a lot of crises, but this is one of the biggest. And we look forward to talking to you about it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.